In any language, there are words and expressions that cannot be translated into other languages in a concise manner. In Korean, there are many such words, especially regarding human relationships and feelings towards each other, and one of them would be In-yeon. In here means humans, and yeon would mean a connection, a thread that connects. Based on East Asian philosophy that nothing is purely by chance and everything is in the context, a bigger scheme of things, In-yeon basically means that everybody you come across, interact and have relationships with are, however insignificant they may seem to be, is pulled together by the thread beyond our own design and desire. It emphasizes the significance of all the people you get involved with and to treat them with respect. And sometimes, the mysterious workings of In-yeon could bring a dead and a living together too. Normally encountering a ghost would mean a horror and confusion, but under the context of In-yeon, even a paranormal encounter turns into something more humane. Today we are taking a look at 3 such stories. They read not like your usual spooky, scary stories, but more like novellas with more subtle emotions. 3 allegedly true stories from Korea about an unusual encounter with the dead. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by your host, Anthony. A couple of decades ago, I and my girlfriend, now wife, were in a long-distance relationship. We first met on an internet community and fell in love despite the distance. Only I had a car then, so the only option was that I drive every weekend to her place on the island off the farthest corner of southeast coast. At the time, there was only one motorway available, and that was a narrow and bendy road too. It was during the rainy season in summer. My work finished late that Saturday, and I was running later than usual. Rain was pouring down all the way. Just 1/3 of the way in, it already passed midnight. I wasn't in a hurry as I was going to meet my girlfriend in the morning anyway. I turned on the music and just enjoyed the views passing by. I love snowy and rainy days. It must have been about 2 or 3 a.m. then. As I turned the corner, I saw a young man in the beam of my headlight. He didn't even have an umbrella in the downpour. He lifted his hand so naturally, as if stopping a cab in the city. I was baffled. In this hour, in the middle of nowhere, in this rain? Must be a mad guy, I thought, and was just about to pass by. But those eyes I saw in that brief moment. Come to think of it, it is already strange enough that I could see his eyes at all in the dark and rain. But they looked sad and pitiful. I stopped the car against my better judgment. I assumed he was going to the next big town, which was only logical. But as the young man hopping onto the passenger seat, he said, "To the beach, please." His voice was thin, like it hadn't even broken yet. I was a bit taken back. What, was he thinking me as a cabbie or something? I mean, beach was sort of on the way, but he didn't even say passing thank you. But his demeanor, looking out the window without a word more, had something so tragic about it that I could not say anything. I assumed maybe he had his heart broken and drank a glass too much or something. Past a couple more towns, the rain thinned out and it got foggy instead. So dense it was that it felt like I was driving in a cloud. Soon I reached a crossroad if I was to carry my way onto the girlfriend's. But I was hesitant as the beach was still quite a long way off from there, especially on foot. I have to take the different way from here. What do you say? Should I drop you here, or do you want me to take you home? I asked. The boy turned to look at me. It was the first time I had a good look at his face. It was a handsome face, and above all, pale. Not a surprise, God knows how long he'd been standing in the rain. You're not looking well. I have time. I can drive you all the way to your home, I offered. But he said it was okay, and I could drop him there. I'm not so much a saint after all, and didn't insist further. The boy just bobbed his head as he got off. As I drove off, I looked at the rear view mirror, but he wasn't there. I even stopped the car past the intersection, but I could not see the trace of him. Fog was still thick, and I didn't give too much thought of it further. By the time I reached the girlfriend's town, it was 5 in the morning. I parked the car somewhere quiet and decided to have a couple of hours of a snooze before I see her. I was woken up by the knocking on the window. In the grey light of dawn, the young man was looking inside. I nearly fainted. I rolled the windows down, trying to hide my shock. The boy smiled and said he'd thank me. Nobody else was willing to pick him up. Had he come all this way to say that? But how? He didn't answer my question, but said, "Don't take the motorway 88 on a rainy day." What? Rain? Why? He just turned around and walked away. I tried to get out and catch him, but the door was stuck. I pushed and pulled the door to open it, and I woke up. Oh, that was a dream. I tried the door. It opened without any trouble. The dream was so real, and outside the dawn was breaking in grey light just like in the dream. Was it even real that I gave the boy a lift? Anyway, I had a good Sunday with a girlfriend, but I had to go back in the evening again. I talked about the boy and what he told me in the dream over the last coffee with her before I hit the road again. Girlfriend looked serious. The weather was turning rainy again, and she insisted that I should not take the motorway 88. There was another route around, but I wasn't familiar with it. But as she insisted. Halfway on the rainy road, I heard the news on the radio. There was a chain collision involving 7 vehicles, including an oil tanker. Apparently, at least several were killed. I realized had I taken the usual route on the motorway 88, I would have been passing just about the spot where the collision occurred. But it should be just a coincidence, shouldn't it? I didn't ponder too much and had almost forgot all about it. 2 years passed. I planned to make a summer holiday with some friends at the very beach. It was an occasion to introduce my girlfriend to my gang too. By the time we arrived, it was late, which was inevitable as it was so far off. The only lodging we could find at such an hour was a cheap guest house in a shabby modular building. I was so tired and fell asleep soon, and in the dream, I met the young man again. He looked angry. "What are you doing here?" He blamed me as if to drive me away. When I woke up from it, it was just 2 a.m. Something was telling me it wasn't just a dream. I woke my friends. They got all mad to be disturbed just a couple of hours into their sleep. I barely explained that I had an ominous dream and that we would be better to get out of there. They all thought I had gone crazy naturally, but I insisted and managed to take them all out to the front yard. They lighted cigarettes, swearing at me. But then, fire! Something bursted and shot up a ball of fire, which quickly reached our room. A modular house with a styrofoam insulation engulfed in fire in no time at all. Other guests poured out barely in their underwear, but many of them were already badly hurt. We heard one of them eventually passed in the hospital. Only then I told my friends the whole story about the young hitchhiker I gave a ride 2 years ago. The jolly summer holiday plan was already not to be, and friends suggested that we should look up the boy. We asked around the village, and the bits of stories we could piece together was: about 25 years ago, a high school student fell to his death from a cliff nearby. Some said it was because of a broken heart. Others said he was drunk. Some said it was suicide. Others an accident. The police concluded as a suicide. He was a local living with his mother only, and his mother disappeared after his death. And that was about all we could gather. I haven't met the young man again to this day, but on a rainy summer night I still think of him and wonder if I really gave him a ride. I'm a mechanic specialized in fixing refrigerators. My job includes maintaining mortuary cabinets, fridges that store dead bodies. At the beginning I felt a bit intimidated about the task, but soon accepted that a work is a work. One day when I was still a trainee, I and a senior mechanic were performing a regular maintenance of a mortuary cabinet unit. Suddenly we heard the siren of an ambulance and noises of people bustling around, and came in a pushbed with a dead body on it. It was the first time I saw a dead person, and I freaked out facing one unprepared. We felt it disrespectful to carry on working there, so stood on the side a while. I could not help but observe the person despite of myself. As young as myself, muscular face, and a body testifying years of workout. Whether from a mere curiosity or a compassion for such an untimely death, I could not take my eyes off him. What struck me most was his expressionless, almost calm face. Then I saw the horrible blue-black line running about his neck. It was heartbreaking. Every suicide must have its own story behind, but what the blue line on his neck signified, and his blank face totally devoid of pain and suffer, that contrast left an unforgettable impression in my memory. A few years later, when the memory became somewhat blurred, I happened to talk to the new staff in the administrative office, and for some reason recounted the experience to him. He then said that he had a very close friend who hanged himself after his girlfriend left him on top of a series of other misfortunes. He sadly ended his own life. Grabbed by a strange feeling, I asked which funeral house his body was interred and on which date. It matched the place and day I had seen the dead young man. Indeed, his friend used to be a judo wrestler. Sometimes the destiny works in a strange way beyond our expectation, that in this big world that I got to meet a friend of the dead young man. Having learned about his life story, now I think I can understand what his calm face meant. Having left all the life's weights he could not bear behind. In Korea, there are occasionally some people who brag about him being the descendant of a grand family line. One of my friends was such a case. It's usually a bluff without substance, but in his case, well, anybody who visited his grandfather's place would realize it wasn't just a white lie. The grand mansion was more akin to what I saw at folk villages. Layers of walls that separated sections of women's quarter, men's quarter, service quarter, several large storages. Traces of lives over generations were all contained in the elegant wooden structures. I used to spend at least a week of summer vacation there. Not that there was anything particularly exciting in the countryside, but in that house, I could just spend the whole day watching the raindrops falling off from the tip of the elegantly curved tiled roof. But anyway, this story is not about me, but what my friend's mother has experienced as a newlywed. My friend's parents had to live as a weekend couple for the first 3 months. They'd been searching for a suitable place for their honeymoon home long before the wedding, but the one place they really liked still needed 3 months before it was available. So for those 3 months, the groom stayed on in his old lodging near his work, while the bride stayed by the in-laws in that grand old house. The household was much shrunk, and by then there lived just her parents-in-law, younger brother-in-law who was still single, and a middle-aged woman who helped with house chores. There wasn't really any hard works for her, nothing like the dramatic stories about in-laws from hell forcing her to wash clothes in the freezing water, etc. Now that wasn't entirely unheard of in a generation. The only thing was she had to wake up earlier than what she was used to, as her parents-in-law, being the country folks, would rise at the crack of dawn. Usually she had no problem, but occasionally she could not shake off the temptation to snooze just 5 minutes more, just another 5 minutes more. That morning she closed her eyes again, saying just 5 minutes more to herself. Then she woke up for somebody calling out, "Madam?" She checked the clock to find exactly 5 minutes past. She just thought the voice was dream manifesting her sense of vigilant living with in-laws. A few days later, she woke up once again with somebody calling out, "Madam?" She opened her eyes, startled, to find she had overslept a good 20 minutes than she should have. She must have stopped the alarm in her sleep too. Without the voice, she would have slept through the morning. But whose voice was it? She looked around and outside, but could find nobody. And by the way, who addressed one with "Madam" nowadays? Confused, she asked the lady who helped with the chore, but she just brushed it off as her being too sensitive living in yet strange place. But friend's mother wasn't convinced. While she was grateful for the gentle voice helping her to get up on time, but it was nonetheless spooky. But she dared not to ask her in-laws either. One weekend, rather than husband coming home, she was to join him in Seoul. There were a few things to decide about decorating the honeymoon home to be, and it was also a chance to visit her parents. The night before the weekend trip, she was somewhat excited that she could not sleep until the early hours. After all, it was the first outing in 2 months since her moving into the in-laws. Then she woke up with feeling something fumbling with her duvet. The room looked just the same as usual in the dim blue light of the early dawn. She was about to close her eyes again when she heard something making bustling noise from the foot of the duvet. She was now wide awake. While she wasn't sure what to do, she felt this time slight move at the corner of her duvet just a few centimeters away from her shoulder. She pretended still in sleep and peeked where she felt the movement. She could clearly see dimples on the duvet as if some fingers pressed on them. Old-fashioned duvet was filled with an inch-thick cotton wool and would leave marks if pressed with a hand. Now that hand prints moved along the edge of the duvet and stopped just a few centimeters below her face. She was just frozen and could not even make a noise all the while. Back in Seoul, she first visited her parents. While talking about the life with in-laws, she also made a passing comment about a strange voice calling her madam. Her aunt then half-jokingly said if she should seek a shaman or something. For the first time in her life, she thought about it seriously. Till then, seeking a shaman was just some superstitious old lady's business to her. But soon she forgot about it all as her husband joined in and spent a busy day selecting wallpapers and shopping the new household goods. Came the Monday morning and she was about to start her return trip when her mother held her back that there was some last important business. Apparently her mother brought her to a Buddhistic temple. Her mother was a devout Buddhist and chose the temple over a shaman. Fortune-telling or shamanism is not anyway in line with Buddhism, but there are occasionally some monks with particular spiritual sensitivity, and her mother brought her to one such one. Neither her mother nor she really mentioned anything about the mystery voice, and just chatted about mundane subjects with a monk for over an hour. Then, as if it was mere a passing comment, the monk said to her, "Your life should be easy at the in-laws, as she's still looking after her madam day and night." My friend's mother was shocked that he picked exactly that word, madam. The monk finally started to explain the details, which surprised both her and her mother. The monk first described the grand house of her in-laws as if he'd been there already. And then he consoled her that it was a well-meaning poor spirit that wanted to help her and nothing to be scared of, and said that she should try and help her to pass on to the heaven now. He further explained it was a common practice a few generations back that a young bride of a high-born brought her own maid as she moved into the in-laws. The spirit was one such maid to one of the women who married into her in-laws' family long time ago. Not much older herself than her madame, and just in the same shoes of leaving her family and old life behind, she had faithfully served her mistress, but for whatever reason had died young before her mistress. For the sense of guilt not fulfilling her duty, and for worries about the mistress left behind, her spirit could not move on and was still hanging around the house. And when my friend's mother came to live there, the young bride must have looked like her mistress to this spirit all those years ago, and she started to serve her now. But it was time to help the poor kind soul to move on. There must be a relic that worked as an anchor to keep her there, and friend's mother should find that first, said the monk. Easier said than done. How was she to find the relic in the house where everything was the relics of generations upon generations? So she came back to the in-laws with a seemingly impossible task. From the day on, she discreetly started the treasure hunt around the house, checking in the old cabinets and boxes room by room. A part of her wanted just ignore the whole thing when the spirit was a kind one anyway. But thinking of this maid's life, leaving her own family behind to come here as a sort of dowry, and still trying to fulfill her duty to this day, she felt so sorry for her and once again carried on with her search. One day she checked in one of the storage rooms, which stored various screens, tables, vessels for memorial rituals. It wasn't just a storage, but more like a neatly arranged museum exhibition of the family's history. As she looked around, a big rice cabinet at the corner came to her eyes. With her household shrunken, they didn't need such a large rice storage anymore, and it served more as a pedestal to put other things on. She checked around and things on the cabinet, but nothing popped out as the potential relic of the dead maid. That night, she had a dream in which she saw herself walking towards the storage room and towards the rice cabinet at the corner. Not a dramatic dream, but it was enough to bring her back for a further inspection. This time, she moved all the objects on the cabinet and opened the top. She found some charcoals wrapped in newspapers, and various silk threads and embroidery rings, and a small wooden box with a handle. She was drawn to it. She sat on the spot to open the box. Neatly lined with paper, it was obviously a sewing box. It contained a thimble made with layers of colorful fabrics, rusty small scissors, little wooden bobbins, and a pin cushion still holding some needles on it. Interesting, but she could not tell how exactly all the box and the contents were, so she took it to her father-in-law to ask about it. He remembered it had been used already by his grandmother, and could have been already an heirloom by then. As no women in the family had interest in embroidery anymore, he had collected all the embroidery tools and stored it in the rice cabinet. Now she learned it could be old enough to have a relation to the dead maid, but the box and everything in it were all too dainty and elegant to have been used by the maid. The whole thing must have rather belonged to the lady of the house. But a hunch guided her hand to the pincushion. Despite of herself, she held it in her hand and started to pull the seams apart till it torn open a little. Inside was a bunch of black hair as its filling. Nowadays needles are made with stainless steel, but in the old days they could get rusty very easily. So people used to rub it on the hair to coat it with a natural hair grease before storing, and in the same vein of idea, occasionally filled pincushions with hair too. Of course, she could never be sure whose hair that really was, but her mind was set, and burned the pincushion with a prayer for the maid's peaceful rest at last. Did it work? Well, all she could say was she didn't hear the gentle voice calling, "Madam," again. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. Now that we are heading into the darkest days of the year, or at least in the Northern Hemisphere, and especially this year we seem to have to get through them without the usual festivity and blinks towards Christmas holiday, I wanted to read something a bit warmer and nicer, even in the paranormal context. I hope you enjoy them too. If you haven't yet, please consider giving my video a thumbs up, leaving comments, subscribing to my channel, and sharing it with others. Your interest and love would really help me to continue with this channel. Hope you are all keeping warm and safe. Until the next, take care.